I'm going to go over the introduction to Camera Raw that I worked through in class not long ago. I'm going to use the same image so there's some continuity between what we worked through and what's going to be in this example. You may recall that I had suggested and in fact cautioned that the very first thing that you want to do is go to Photoshop actually and go up to Photoshop Preferences, Camera Raw Preferences, and make sure that down here the JPEG and TIFF settings are set like this: automatically open all supported, automatically open all supported. There may be times when you don't want that, so you could say disable. The machines, when you first open them, are going to be set to this: automatically open JPEGs with settings and TIFFs with settings. You will never get anything to open if you wanted to open a JPEG in Camera Raw, which sometimes is not a bad thing to do as long as you've been shooting large JPEG files. You'll never get them into Camera Raw as long as these settings are like this. So remember, always go to all supported and all supported. Now you will have to do this every work session in our lab at CCBC because the machines are programmed to reset at the end of a lab period. Okay? So that's important. One less frustration is always a good thing. All right, so I'm going to just simply double click this file, and as a workflow issue, it's real important, and I would imagine almost always you would do this anyway. Take the raw files through Bridge. All right, they will open up when you double click them. You can also drag a file, a Camera Raw file, right to Photoshop, and it will automatically open it in Camera Raw. But that really isn't the best way because you're not taking a look at everything that was shot. You'll recall that when we opened this file, we could see there's some huge exposure differences here. This was what we would call an overscaled subject. There's deep shadow, and actually some of this is close to being correct. If we go ahead and hit Auto, you can see that Auto makes an overall exposure correction. You can see here it gave it a plus a half a stop. Sometimes I think, especially when you're learning Camera Raw, it's a good idea to do the auto setting just so you can see what it thinks you should be doing. All right? So we're going to pretend that we're not going to look at that for now and go back to default. And there's a reason for this. We're going to leave the most obvious area to the last, and let's take the area that's not in bad shape right now, the wet rocks and the nice glow from the foliage on the left-hand side of the rocks, the stone, is good. So we still need to brighten it up a little bit, which means we'll probably start by going to our brush adjustment tool. Okay, adjustment brush. K is the shortcut for it. I don't know that you need to remember it, but in any case, click, and you'll notice I'm going to go back one. Take a look at the menu here on the right-hand side. This is the general settings menu. And you'll see you do have other tools in here. As soon as I go to like the brush tool, watch that menu on the right-hand side. It will completely change to a whole new array of settings. You'll see temperature, exposure, many things that you can do with layers in Photoshop. But the magic here is that it's only affecting the brush, the area that you're going to paint in here. All right, so we're going to go a little overboard here, and I've got my exposure set, well, let's go down a little bit to 1.5 stops. All right, and let's start with a large brush, and I'll move this over. I think you're going to see it on the video, the defining of the non-feathered area is in the circle, the hard edge circle, and then you've got a dotted line circle that sits outside of that. That's your feather area. So between the hard circle and the dotted line is where the effect feathers back to 0. So let's start over here and just start painting a little bit. And again, you'll see, and you can keep working this some. Again, I'm going up quite a bit. Always change your brush size. The people that have the most trouble with Camera Raw are the ones that get lazy with changing brush sizes when they're working. So we can go right out to the water here and bring some of this back up. If we wanted more, the slider is completely interactive and it sticks with the last tool that you use, so it's great. Obviously that's way overdoing it, and somewhere right in here is probably good. We might want to come back later and darken the area that's not in sharp focus. That's okay. Alright, so when I go back and pick a different tool or pick the general settings, which is where the magnifier is, the zoom tool, watch. If I click it, that little marker for where that brush center was goes away and you go back to your standard settings. So you can work the tools along with the general controls. I'm looking at the overall exposure, and I'm just leaving it so that we have more to work with the specific tools. The highlights I could globally turn back down a little bit so we got a little bit more detail in them. And the shadows I could turn up a little bit, like so. But that's not overriding the brush tool. It's actually adding to it. So you can see, you know, if I open it up too far, it's going to be much worse. All right? So why don't we stop there, and in part 2 I'll go over a couple of the other tools.